Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. So, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I always joke that there's less than 2 degrees. There's this whole theme going on that we're talking about, right? So, Sarah C. Gavagnoni and I, who are doing the Wonderland program that we're launching in May in Ascended World, and we call that 7 degrees from separation. And I call this 2 degrees from worthiness, which is actually the first course in the program. But I wanted to talk about it because it's something that comes up a lot. It is what I always say, one of the keys to most of anything that holds us back. And it's so important because we don't really see it. It's not what we think it is. You can ask 10, 15, 20 people if they believe they're worthy, and they'll say yes, but then they have situations in their life that would reflect back to them otherwise. So I want to talk about that because when I say 2 degrees to 2 degrees from worthiness, the whole thing is, or actually 2 degrees from unworthiness is what holds us back, is that whole like joke, remember the 80s Kevin Bacon thing of 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. So it's like said 2 degrees from at the most 2 degrees from worthiness. Any limitation or challenge that we have that we hold ourselves back with, I can usually point back to worthiness in some way, shape, or form within 2 steps. And let me tell you how that happens. So we get to this place where it's funny is I don't have a screen for comments today, which is weird. I know Facebook changed something this week, so bear with me if there are comments in here and I don't see them. I'm going to pull it up on my phone. But so let's talk about that. So, when we talk about things like I've always had just let me just quote many things that I hear people say all the time. And we all say them, right? Oh, well, I always have this problem, or I've always just had enough and that's, been fine. And I guess that's my whole, that's my fate, right? That's my journey. That's just what I accept, right? And when we say things like that, we get to a place of victimhood, right? And we just sort of throw our hands up. And why do we get into a place of victimhood? Well, at the end of the day, it's because we believe we're unworthy of being more powerful, of being the creator of our reality, and of, really taking control of the outcome of things. Oh, I don't like to say control because control is a perception too, but really taking part in the creation of things in our reality. And hold on, there I am. There we go. This way I can see some comments. Sort of weird today. Hi, Anne. So, now I can see the comments on my phone. So here's the thing, we settle for things. We go into this place of, oh, well, this is what the cards dealt me. These are the cards I was dealt. These are the ones for me to live with. Let's see, I inherited this. Oh, this has been a family thing, so I have to continue on with it. I'm only in a so-so relationship. I'm only in a so-so job. Oh, it's good enough. It pays the bills, that kind of stuff. We say those kind of things all the time. And we don't realize that it comes from this innate place of unworthiness that we've forgotten that we're the divine. So, from my perspective and understanding, we are all pieces, and I've said this over and over again, we're all pieces of this whole consciousness, of the whole divine consciousness, of, whether you want to call it divine consciousness or God or source or the quantum field, it's all the same thing. All there is, the universe. And, like we've shown that in quantum physics, right? We can see how energy just exists, and energy is what our consciousness is about. And energy doesn't go away, it just changes form. So when we talk about and it's all connected, it's interconnected. Quantum physics, if you've never looked into quantum physics, it's a great field to just look into the basics. It's so fun to see how it's incredible how you have atoms that can be, or molecules that can be split, and they still communicate across vast distances with each other without any effort whatsoever. The connection, the energy, and that things are so much more holographic than our mind tries to define. And in that, the acceptance of the fact that we are part of the whole, we are part of God and source and, divine consciousness. We are all of that, and we have the access to it as we choose. But when we've created separation, in duality and separation, we had created that perception of a me and not me. And I always explain that in terms of like a magician, right? We go to see a magician, and the magician has their assistant get into a box, a big box, and they have these slates, right, that they put in and the assistant lays down, they close the box, you see the head in one end, and you see the feet in the other, and then they put these slates that break up the box into pieces, right? And when we look at it, we're like, oh my God, they're splitting up the assistant into these different pieces because they pull the boxes apart and the feet are still wiggling, the head's, still smiling or whatever. And so do we know at some level, we know at some level that that's not really what we're seeing, but it's the suspension of belief for the moment to say, oh wow, look at that, look at how the magician like broke up the assistant into pieces. And yet we know at some level that that's actually not the case. It's an illusion. So the way I see and understand the way we've split up into duality and separation identity has been that we've put these plates in between ourselves as that whole consciousness to create the illusion of separation, to create the illusion of depth and lack and exclusion and identity. And really the biggest thing is reflection back on ourselves to see what we are, to see what we can be, and to see how we can embody that, right? So when we do that and talking about that, so from that perspective, when we embody like this, right? And there's many ways to embody in this multiverse, and it's just the same consciousness in different form, right? Whether it's a plant, an animal, a planet, a solar system, another being from another dimension, it doesn't even matter. It's all how we have split and divided, and we've done that concentrically, as my understanding. But here's the thing: the reason I'm explaining all this in my understanding is when we create those slats in separation and in the effort of reflection back to us, we create the idea and understanding of me and not me. And when we do the not me, we've created this energy around the not me as it is not who I am. I am excluded from that, right? That I am this and not that in duality and separation. And when we start to believe that of ourselves, then we start to separate ourselves from the divine. We separate ourselves from being the divine, and we've forgotten that it's an illusion, like in the magic show, that when, they put the boxes back together and they pull the slates out, the assistant steps out all in one piece. So it's the same thing, we embody, and it's like, this is a slate. This is one of those little pieces of the box in this physical body. And we forget, this is an illusion and it's part of the game. And then eventually we'll just pull it all out and remember, that we're all part of the whole. But when we're in that little piece, in these bodies, in these meat jackets, we forget that we are actually the divine. And that's part of the fun. Like, I don't know, I say the fun. When you say it's not fun, but I would say it's part of the fun of it, or else we wouldn't do it the way we've done it. And so when we get there, then we get this innate feeling of, if I feel like I am not divine, and if I feel like I am not infinite, and I feel like I'm in this finite little box, and that's really what all of who I am, then I start to believe I'm unworthy, and that there's a not me, which means that there's something that is outside of me that I cannot have, right? So then there's lack. And when you say that in that way, it's like, well, I cannot have it because I'm unworthy of being, the whole. I mean, if you look at, and I don't like to use specific religious contexts, although I do, and there's so many different ones in different contexts. But if you look at the whole thing of the Garden of Eden, right? And it's funny how the whole story has twisted into this. Instead of the creation of separation, it's to the creation of lack, to the creation of hierarchy and yeah, and less than, more than subordination. And when we start doing that, we start implying and we start creating and we start repeating stories to ourselves and to each other about how in this separation we created this hierarchy. And in the hierarchy, it means it's true that you are not this and you can't be this and you don't have that kind of power, you don't have that kind of ability, and you don't have that kind of allowance. You're not allowed to be that way. You have to be special to be this way, or to be in this level of remembrance, or to be so lucky. And I hear that all the time of people saying, oh, well, it's just not in my cards. I've always had sort of this cloud over me. And you get all that kind of stuff. But then you look at the more, so that's all worthiness. Worthiness, worthiness, worthiness. Always goes back to worthiness, because if we believed and we remembered that we are in fact part of the divine and the infinite, power of creation, of the multiverse, then we could accept that within ourselves without ego. And so that's the whole thing, because when we start to accept that worthiness, then we accept that truly there is no hierarchy, because we're all equally worthy, because we're all the divine, just broken up into those little fake little boxes of the magician in the partitions. And it's like, oh, look at that great magic trick we're doing, right? But we're still part of that whole thing. And so when we start to realize that it's not that one little piece of the box is more important than the other, it's that we're all part of that, and we're all playing that same game of illusion of separation um, and the not me kind of thing, and the exclusion. So part of our coming back to consciousness is that recognition and realization that we are in fact that whole. We are in fact part of that whole, and we are the divine, and we are infinitely powerful. And the biggest thing, the biggest chunk that we have created, the partition, so to speak, that we have created within ourselves, that has really made a deep impact on how we act, on what we create in our reality, on whether we take responsibility for the creation of our reality or not, has to do really with this feeling of worthiness or unworthiness. So, for example, if we go through life saying, well, we believe what people say, oh, well, you take the card, the hand that's dealt you, whatever, it's all victimhood. And when we get into a place of victimhood, we get into a place of believing that we're unworthy of more than what we have for whatever reason. We believe we need to be punished. Well, look at that, but going back to that original, the whole Garden of Eden concept of, oh, well, because of knowledge and separation, well, then you're punished, and that you're a loser kind of thing. And basically, you're a loser, right? And that you have to spend your entire life proving that you're not a loser so you go to heaven, right? Really, we never left. We never left the bliss of creation. We never left the void of creation and potential. We are that. That's all we are. We can't not be that. And it's a matter of that's what we've played, the game we've played, to separate and exclude ourselves, to pretend that we're excluded and that we have to earn it back, which is really funny, because it's the opposite. I always say this world, especially this set of dimensions, is a real backwards world, because it's like we're looking in the mirror all the time. When you look in the mirror, you're seeing reflected back to you the opposite of what it actually is. So, and that's what we do with the partition. We pull it out and we reflect it back. We have to remember that reflection changes what we're actually seeing. So the whole worthiness thing, it's like many go to, and they say, okay, well, all right, I've had a slew of, or let's just give it that. And part of it has to do with, we've had lifetimes upon lifetimes upon lifetimes, experiences in different forms, different faces, different elements on having these experiences in separation and exclusion. And in doing that, we have attained these beliefs of unworthiness. We've attained these beliefs of, I did wrong, I was bad, I abused my power, I took advantage of other people, I did all this kind of stuff, and so therefore I'm unworthy of having a good life. I'm only worthy of having so much. I'm only worthy of allowing a certain amount of power, to come through. And we've equated power with a bad thing because of the potential of abuse. But that only comes from the ego. That only comes from the idea that we have to have hierarchy when we attain, remember the access to our power, to our divine, infinite self of creation. And so when we do that, um, we I just totally lost my train of thought. I do this once a week. I get rolling and I get so far out there and I forget what the words were that were coming. But we've we've believed, oh, the good and bad. So the good and bad is also created in separation. The idea of good and bad and good and evil, all that kind of stuff is in separation and ego based, right? When ego, it's the ego that excludes, because the ego's job, my understanding, has been to explore identity and separation. So all the energies around ego are that of identity and separation, which is like separation energy, anger, anxiety, fear, um, judgment, shame, blame, guilt, doubt, sorrow, pain, all that stuff. And so all of that, and it's not bad. Again, it's not bad. It simply is. And it's when we start to identify that, then we can say, oh, look at, I see that. And so really unworthy is almost like the original sin in many ways, but it's the original energy of separation, of putting that slat in, because then all of a sudden when we have this me and not me, it's like, oh, well, am I worthy to have that because it's not me? Or I don't have that because it's not me, so I must not be worthy to have it innately. And these are the things that we've created in the depth of separation. So when we look at how we create our lives, like we only allow, in many cases, we only allow ourselves to be so good, so powerful. We only allow ourselves to be so conscious. We only allow ourselves to have so much because we believe, oh, like we've all these beliefs that we've created that, well, if you have this, well, then you can't be. So, like, there are many beliefs of if you are spiritually enlightened or in remembrance, that you can't be abundant or prosperous because those things don't go together. But they do. They naturally go together because then you just create abundantly, and because you know that you are the universe and that you can create whatever there is to support you on whatever your intended creation is. So this is how things start to change. And I will say that one of the most challenging things that I have had in teaching over the past decade, teaching students on stepping into their power, it's funny because, my whole philosophy comes from like really pushing people into their own power, pushing people into their own empowerment, into accessing their own intuition, their own knowing, their own creation, and all that kind of stuff. And really, the most challenging part is when I say, you can do this, because you're amazing and perfect, just like I am. Like, yeah, absolutely, I'm divine and I'm God, and so are you. And so therefore I know you have all this ability in you. And the funny thing is, it's not an expectation, it's just a knowing. Except when somebody's not ready and not feeling worthy enough, they can't accept that within themselves, so they'll balk at it. They'll be like, oh, you're crazy, oh, I can't do that. And then you have 1,000 reasons why they can't do that, all the buts. I have these physical limitations, I have these mental limitations, I have this blah 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 limitations. I'm not as gifted as you, I'm not as aware as you. Like, I'm not as all the buts, all the separations, all the exclusions, all those partitions of lack and the not me's that cause that we use as the excuse to cover up that belief of unworthiness underneath, because we believe we have to, okay, well, all right, I have this sickness, I have this injury, and so I have to be a victim to it. So anytime we have victimhood, meaning like, and we throw our hands up in the air and say, I can't do anything to change that, then we are claiming that there's something outside of us that's a not me that has control over what our creation of experience is. And that's really not the case. And that's actually, there's nothing that's not me. The reality is, there's nothing that's not me. So even if it's presented as not me, it is me reflecting back to me to remind me that I'm pretending that I'm excluding myself from that so that I can take it back. And so it's a very different way for us to start to exist. There's so many layers of this, like even worthy to exist, being worthy to exist, being worthy to be prosperous, being worthy to be healthy and vibrant and happy. Oh, that's a big one. And you know what's funny is that sounds so almost silly, right? To say I'm worthy to be happy because people are like, "Oh, that's nuts." But I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that don't believe they deserve happiness unless they make everybody else happy first. Because that's part of what we've said. Oh no, look, and so let's look at that. Let's like unentangle that for a minute. When we get into this place of I must sacrifice to make everybody else around me happy, I have to have everybody approve of me. That is actually a deep sense of unworthiness because it means that I don't believe I'm innately worthy. So therefore, I have to prove myself to everybody around me. And when I have to do that, right? So like I have to prove myself so that they think highly of me. So if when they think highly of me, I can think highly of myself. I can be proud, which is an ego word, just like humility is an ego word too. Many don't realize that. But it's but so I can be proud of myself so because of how other people see me, right? And when that means is I put more weight on what other people believe of me than I believe of myself, which means that I don't innately believe that I'm worthy. I don't innately believe that I'm perfect and that I'm divine and everything else. So all of this work around worthiness comes back to getting to this place of empowerment to say, you know, I am worthy. I am worthy of overcoming. I am worthy of recreating my reality so that I have it in every possible way. We all deserve to create this amazing reality for ourselves. And when we create this amazing reality for ourselves, then we create an amazing reality. Then we give everybody around us the permission, the reminder, and the permission that they can create that kind of reality too. So that is really it is helping by example. And that is the real way to do it because it keeps everyone empowered. It keeps everyone pushing everyone to that place of wait a second, if you have it, I have it because we're just part of that same, going back to the magician box, right? We're part of the same assistant, or like we're part of the magician. We're the magician too. We created, we're the assistant. We're all of that. We're on the stage, we're creating the production, everything else. And some ways they're saying, well, like we're just different boxes, we're in different costumes or whatever, but we are the same divine consciousness. Then we can allow ourselves to express that. And when and then we give each other permission for everyone to express that in their own unique way, because that is why we created that separation so that we could create all these different facets. And the way I look at it is this infinitely faceted, beautiful, like incredible gemstone that we've created in this multiverse. And so when we do that, we look at all these, and each facet is so incredibly perfect in a multiverse in itself and in its entirety of creation. And so it's such a beautiful thing to start seeing, that we start seeing it within each other. And then all we can do is overflow with love. And all we can do is support each other because we're supporting ourselves. And when I support myself and I'm overflowing in that self-nourishment and that self-love and that self-worthiness, well, then I hold the energy where you feel like, oh, well, maybe I should tap into that too. Oh, I do have that. And eventually you start to do that. And it's like, and then we stop on dependencies, right? So again, when we go to, like, it was funny, I had a client once that came into me and she had done like years of spiritual training and different practices and everything else. And yet when we had these discussions and I was talking to her and said, okay, so she was talking about how she had moved here from another state, and she said, well, this wasn't really the state, and I'm having a hard time finding a house here, because of the market's really really tight, and she goes, and it's really hot, and she's like, and I really wanted to move, to another state, and I really felt pulled, and I saw my house that I really wanted there, and whatever, and I said, so then why'd you come here? And she's like, well, because I had 3 psychics tell me that it was a bad idea for me to go to the other state. And so then we proceed on the conversation, and then I mean, this is just a great, and I'm not picking on this one individual, this is just a great conversation because these are things that we do, but this pointed out so clearly. And then later on the conversation, something, we were talking about something that in the session, we were talking about something that had happened that caused her to distrust everybody else. And oh, I just don't trust anybody except for myself. And I said, but do you? Do you trust yourself? And this is all interrelated. When you look at the, so not to do the plug for the Wonderland program, but these are why all of these interrelated topics are getting pulled out to really focus on shifting within us because they're so very core and interrelated. But anyway, she said she doesn't trust anybody else. And I said, but then you don't trust yourself either. And she goes, well, I do trust myself. I'm the only one I trust. I said, do you really? I said, but you took all that spiritual, all those practices, yeah, intuitive practices and classes and all that kind of stuff. And yet you're going to psychics to tell you what you're doing. And you had such a strong pull to go to this other state. And yet you came to this one because 3 people told you. And I'm like, so what if they were all wrong? Because they're not you. And your guidance, if your guidance was pulling you to this other state, they're just translating what they see, which is why I don't. And I said this is why I don't do psychic work, because there's this innate habit of us to translate what we see, and I see bigger picture all the time when I'm working with somebody, but then it's like how I see it and understand it is tries to be like the ego tries to translate it. And when you start trying to translate it, you're changing the meaning of it, or you're starting to then put in an opinion of what's right and wrong or good and bad or what to do. And and I always tell people, listen to other people when they say you should do this. Like the biggest red flag was that somebody else said, you should go to this state, not that one. And that's an opinion, right? But here's the thing, if we have this innate sense of unworthiness and that I'm not worthy to hear my own guidance, I'm not worthy to trust my own guidance over the guidance of over what others get, then that's an unworthiness thing. That means I'm not worthy to do it. Then we're not going to listen. I'm going to listen to other people until it falls down. And that's the funny part, is I've had many people come to me who have had a lot of training in listening to their own intuition, listening to their own guidance. And then they go to like a psychic, or they go to like a channeler, or they even just have or they watch the news, and then they have something said to them in 20 different ways from outside of them, and they never once check in with their guidance. Is this for me? Is this the truth for me? Not should I do this, because should I do this invites the ego in for decision. We're looking at higher guidance. But the whole thing is because there's an innate belief that they're unworthy of having the answers, of being the divine and having all of the knowledge of what is going to serve them in their highest and most expanded form of consciousness. If they don't believe they have that worthiness, then they'll just continue. Then we just continue listening to other people over our own guidance. And how many times have you had an understanding or a pull to do something, and you didn't do it because your spouse told you not to, your parents told you not to, your kids told you not to, your friends, the news, our culture told you not to, and then it worked out that had you done it, it would have been a much easier and positive experience or whatever. And then you sort of smack your head and say, I should have a V8, I should listen to that voice. That's a worthiness thing, because we have built into ourselves this innate sense of unworthiness. And so when we shift that to a place of worthiness, when we shift that to a place of divine, infinite divinity, right, then we get to a place of worthiness, of allowing ourselves, and we allow ourselves things that we consider miracles. We allow ourselves to not only have a good existence, but to have a fabulous one. Not only to have an okay relationship or okay relationships, but then we have incredible ones that are nourishing and reflective and not needy in any way. Because when we come to that table in worthiness, in that place of, I love me and I am divine and so are you, then it's not that I need you to fill a hole that I believe I have. It's for us to simply walk this path together because we enjoy the company of each other. We enjoy the adventure together and the journey together. And there's no needy, pulling, lack energies that are connected to that. So, and that has the same thing to do with things like, why we have this kind of life, why we have this kind of job, right? So many people say, oh, well, I have this job, it pays the bills. Yeah, and I can do what I really like to do on the weekends. And it's like, but at some level, that's because you believe you're unworthy of being able to do what you love and are passionate about for a living, and actually just easily be prosperous, have prosperity and abundance from all of that, and have it not be a job. And I will tell you, I love what I do. I am passionate about this. I could do it 24/7, and everything, like, all I choose are things that really flip my switch now, because that's what my guidance is. And the more we do that, the more exploit, the easier prosperity just comes. And it comes in all directions, in all kinds of ways and forms. And when we allow it and trust, because we know we're worthy of it, then it becomes easy and fun. And then we can really play. We can really play in our creation. So that's the place for you to start this week, is look at, where you feel like, I mean, and even our sickness and injury and illness, we feel like we have to be, it's almost like a burden. When I look at it energetically, it's like, oh, I have to wear this 3,000 extra pounds of whatever sickness or injury or illness. I mean, there's an element of that in almost everything. I have to be sick because that's all I deserve. I'm only worthy to be the same as somebody else who's sick. I'm only worthy enough to, like, or I'm not worthy to, it's unworthy to not have issues, because that's not the human experience, which is really warped and backwards kind of beliefs. But it's created the enjoyment of the suffering life that we've created in this whole existence. So look at that, though, because when we shift to that worthiness, we shift to the place of knowing, I created this for myself. We can get into self-responsibility, another one of the courses of the Wonderland. I get into a place of self-responsibility and knowing, if I created it, and I did, and I'm infinitely capable and powerful, then I can change it. And that's anything. And I've seen people change things that doctors said that they couldn't change. I've changed things myself. I've gotten rid of all my allergies. I had tons of them. I was so sensitive to so many things, and I would get rashes from everything. I changed all of that, and I don't have that anymore. I've seen some people who've had so many allergies they could barely function or eat or anything else. Just get rid of all of them and just be completely healthy and vibrant. So, and all has come from these beliefs that I have to hold on to something, created as part of my identity. But a lot of times it's because I'm not worthy or powerful enough to change that within myself. I can only do what other people tell me or give me, or whatever the pill does for me or whatever. And it's like we've allowed that to become a crutch instead of a tool, right? And the tools are having the messages come back to us and then stepping aside and saying, asking guidance, is this my truth? Or what is there for me to garner or to pull from this situation? And that comes with an innate trust that I am worthy of having the clear answer as the divine that I am. So on that, there's a lot to think about, right? But I'm also talking about this because we do, Sarah C. Gavignoni and I, on Ascended World, we are launching the Wonderland program. It starts in May 4th. And the first course of the 7-course series is Worthiness. And it's self-paced. It's a fabulous, powerful, powerful, powerful course. All 7 are. And our guarantee is that, if you stick with us through the 7 months, it is an incredible journey of shifting and clearing out a lot of things that we tend to not look at because we're not seeing them, we're blind to them within ourselves. And we've got decades between the two of us of experience working with many to see this, to see these patterns, right? Those 7 degrees from separation means 7 degrees from separation of the 7 areas that we've created in separation that have prevented us from pulling out those slats and remembering that divine within ourselves. So worthiness, number 1. And so I'll put the link to the program. You could take it one course at a time. You could pick your price and take the whole, the whole program. And I'll put all that in the notes here. And I hope to see you, but then we'll see you next week. So I want you this week, though, specifically in worthiness, look in your life where you believe you have to accept what you've been given, that you can't change it because of whatever. And then look underneath and say, okay, where do I feel like I'm unworthy to change this? And start to tap into that energy. And that's really what we want to do in this course, is take a month and really focus on all of these areas in worthiness. so that we can start stepping more into that power and then shifting into these other things. And we go into trust and guidance, forgiveness, self-responsibility, the shadow, and self-love ultimately, which is, tying it all together. So, food for thought. Hope you join us on that program, but then I hope you join me next week. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter signing out with this week's Living the Shift. Have a great one.